Hello, Blake Rudis here with F64 Academy and F64 Elite, and today I'm going to show you a new masking technique in Photoshop that makes traditional luminosity masks look like child's play, okay? And I'm going to give you 3 supporting reasons as to why this new technique is so much more powerful. Let's go ahead and hop into Photoshop and I'll tell you what this is all about. So this new technique I want to teach you is really awesome, and it's actually been here the whole time. It's right in Photoshop, and there's really nothing new with it. It's just a new way of looking at it. And when I reframe the way I look at this tool, it has been paramount in a new workflow for me in Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw, and I'll go over all that. Now, before I go too far with this, I am going to be promoting my new product, the Zone System Express 6. I know, geez, I can't promote my own product on my own YouTube channel. I know a lot of people already get offended by that, and they already click the negative button when I start to promote my products. It's like everyone wants something for free, but I'm going to teach you something before that happens. But before you get offended by the fact that I'm going to be promoting myself, let me teach you a little quick life lesson about offense. You control what offends you. Whoa. Isn't that powerful? Okay, so let's get into this. All right, so first let's talk about a traditional luminosity mask. Now, traditionally, the way a luminosity mask works is you'll do this trick where you basically press Control-Alt-2. And that's just a way to, if you're really being nitpicky about it, go into the channels and select the luminance channel for your image, which is basically a selection for all of the brightest highlights in the photograph, okay? So now, traditionally what I would do with this luminosity mask is I would make a curves adjustment layer here. Now, if I were to modify this curves adjustment layer, let's go ahead and experiment with this. I'll go ahead and push and pull this slider here and push and pull the curve here, and that modifies the luminance values in this image. And you can see we made a lot more contrast in the photograph. But what are we doing here? Well, if you look at the luminance mask, we're basically saying that anything that's in the brightest white area of this mask, it can go ahead and be edited. And as it transitions into black, so all the medium grays, they can also get a slight adjustment as well. As it transitions into black, nothing will happen. So what we would do here to edit this is we would go to Image, Adjustments, and then Levels. And there's many ways that you can do this. This is just a basic luminosity mask. Okay, so here I can say, okay, well, I don't want nearly as many things to be affected. So I'm going to move this black slider down here on the levels of this mask so that I can protect those areas. And then these areas in white plus those gray tone areas will then get the modification or the edit. And I'll press OK to that. Once I do that, it's going to change how this curve interacts with the image because I basically told it that this mask is controlling where that curve can affect the photograph. Okay, so it's basically luminosity mask in a nutshell. It's just a way to pinpoint, accurately find certain areas in your photograph and protect other areas. And they're great. Trust me, I love luminosity masks. Okay, when I say that we're making luminosity masks looks like child's play, I'm not trying to put them down. I think luminosity masks are great. But for the last, 5 years, I've been working with something called Blendif. And for the last 5 years, I've been thinking to myself, how can you make Blendif a luminosity mask? So this is what I did. I went into curves, and I went ahead and double-clicked here to then see my Blendif. And I said, okay, let's put a color overlay on here to make this whole image magenta. And then I'll go back to my blending options. And then if I come over here to this slider, I am now protecting the black areas from this effect happening. If I press Alt or Option, I can split and feather this and look at that. Okay, perfect. I've got almost the exact selection that I had before in that luminosity mask, but now it's happening right here in Blendif. Turn the color overlay off, press OK, and now I can modify that curve just the same way I modified this curve that was an actual luminosity mask. So if I were to label these, I would label this LM mask, and I would label this one BIF mask. Okay, so essentially it's still a mask. The difference between the two of these is that as pixel values change underneath, the luminosity mask is not going to change its shape. So if this image right here were to get darker, let's say we were to go into the exposure here and make this image darker. Or darker, not brighter. Okay, we'll make this darker like that, okay? And if I were to then turn this luminosity mask on, this luminosity mask is still stuck for the exposure before. Okay, but if I turn this Blendif one on, it's trying to say, okay, wait, you're changing the values underneath. So because you set Blendif, my adjustments are going to be different. And we know that because if we double click on this Blendif mask and I press color overlay, we have a different effect. Let's take this another level. If I grab this exposure slider and I bring this down, now look at it. You see how the Blendif, what that mask is targeting is changing based on what's happening underneath it. Now this luminosity mask will not do that. Okay, this luminosity mask is stuck with whatever you told it to be before. Okay, so I said that there's 3 reasons why this Blendif trick is better than traditional luminosity mask, and that's the first reason. The first reason is that anything that happens underneath that Blendif mask will change and alter how that Blendif mask interacts with the rest of the photograph. It's what I like to call a fluid method. It's like liquid. As you pour the liquid into a different vessel, it just takes the shape of that vessel. But if you try to put an ice cube from a large vessel into a small vessel, guess what? It's not going to fit. It's just going to sit on top of there and it's not going to fit. I'm going to show you why this works in another example here. So I don't want you to get too hung up on these Blendif masks. Actually, in my new course and panel that I've created for Photoshop, the Zone System Express 6, I have a whole series of Blendif masks here that are absolutely incredible. Okay, that's my promotion. So check this out. I'm going to go ahead and delete these here. I'm not even really concerned with this image anymore. Let's move on to the next one. So I've got a beautiful stock image here of this nice young female, and she's going to help me out, okay? And many pictures of her are actually going to help me out, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's do this. Let's go into the Zone System Express because I've now promoted it, and I'll go ahead and just press this button here, which is basically a series of Blendif masks that I've already created for you by the click of a button that create a series of Blendif masks. If you want to see what they look like, you can press View Mask On, and that gives you that magenta overlay of what this zone is, which is basically zones 0 and 1. So I'll turn that off, press View Mask On. That shows me zones 2 and 3 that are in Blendif masks. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this tool to modify this really quickly. So I'm going to maybe make the darks a little bit darker, move on down to the next segment of zones, make them a little bit darker, then go to my zones 4, 5, and 6, which are my midtones, and make them a little bit brighter, but also a little bit darker, and then reduce that opacity of that so it's not so striking. And then I'll move on down to zones 6 and 7, which are traditionally moving into the highlights, and then I'll plus this up a little bit, maybe +1, and then again drop that opacity down so it's not so stark. And then I'll move this down to the next series of zones, which is zones 9 and 10, which are our highest highlights. I'm going over this really fast because in the education that I've created for this course, I talk all about this stuff. So there's no need for me to really sit too much on that. Okay, so here is that series of Blendif masks that I've created for her. Now on this tab, I have traditional luminosity masks. So check this out. Let's take this zone 4, 5, and 6 traditional luminosity mask that we would build for her. And if we press Alt or Option, we can see that here. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to just press this S curve on her face. Okay. So here's the next reason why these Blendif masks are so much better. Blendif masks know no bounds, okay? They are the world traveler, so to speak. They can be in any country at any given time, and they're going to be the same person no matter where they are because they are used to traveling the world, all right? Let's say they know every language on the planet. That's how great these world travelers are. A regular luminosity mask becomes a local mask. So let me go ahead and open up some more images that I have of this young lady here. And let's see, we have one here where she looks slightly embarrassed. And then she has one here where she's looking like she is pretty happy. So let's press Control Alt and minus to make these smaller, Control Alt and minus to make this smaller, and I'll put this right here. So if I wanted to take this adjustment and bring it over to this image, watch what happens. There becomes basically this line work on her face that is the old zone 4, 5, and 6 mask. And it's like, wait a second. You mean to tell me that if I want to do that same adjustment on her with the traditional luminosity mask, I have to make a new luminosity mask and do that same edit over again? Well, watch what happens if we bring that over to here. Same thing. We're going to get the edge of where that mask is of where her eyeball was in the image before, okay? But there's hope. And that's why I'm showing you this new method of luminosity masking because it is so awesome. We can actually call these Blendif masks a form of luminosity masking if you'd like to do that. There's no problem with that at all because essentially we are making luminance channel masks. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and delete those layers and make sure they're gone. Now, if I come over to this one, I'll delete this one too. And I grab this 4, 5, and 6 zone, which is this one right here. And I click and drag it over to this image and then click and drag it over to this image. Guess what? There is no hazing mask. Actually, if we were to go into the zone system and press View Mask On, look at this. Holy crap, son. You mean to tell me that this luminosity mask is just like that water that I told you, that you can take it from one vessel, put it into another vessel, and it's not like an ice cube that's rigid and won't go in, it's like square peg round hole. Okay, this is the type of mask that can fit into any hole at any given time because it's liquid, it's fluid, it takes on the characteristics of what you told it to be, and it stays that way. The groundbreaking thing for this is watch. So if I go over to this one and I click on this here and I click on this group of layers and I drag it and drop it onto this image, and then I click and hold this and drag it onto this image, look at that. All of the exact same adjustments that we just did through all of those zone masks that were hyper detailed in what it is that they were selecting have now fluidly changed themselves from one image to the next. This is how you can actually create extremely crafted fine art images from one image to the next. Let's say you process the first image like, you know what, I did a lot of work on this and crap, I don't like this pose. I'm gonna have to do a whole nother edit on a whole nother image. Not necessarily. You can get these beautiful masks from one image to the next. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 2 is you can drag and drop these layers onto any other photograph in that series, and they will modify them the exact same way. That's tones and colors. And in the Zone System Express, I've got tone and color Blendif masks here that are absolutely wonderful for that. Let's move on to reason number 3. Reason number 3 why I think these masks are so much better than traditional luminosity masks and make them look like child's play is because I already have this pre-cooked. It's kind of like one of those cooking shows where they say, hey, today I'm going to show you how to make this. And then they pull it out of the refrigerator or wherever it is. And like, I've already made it, but here's how you stir it. Yeah, that's kind of what I did here. I already pre-baked this. So I did my tone and my color adjustments, my traditional workflow that I would do on this image. Let's say I want these edits to be done to a whole series of images and I want it done at the raw level. You can do this even at the raw level. You can basically turn these, because they have no masks in them. They're just those Blendif masks that I taught you, which are the global travelers. They're dictated by whatever pixel values you make them in the Blendif settings. They can go wherever they want, which means they can also be turned into a LUT. Now, this is some pretty advanced stuff, but I teach all this stuff in my Zone System Express workflow. So let's check this out. Let's say we hop over to Bridge here, and so we have all these images here that were taken from the same place that have relatively the same lighting conditions. Which means that if I were to turn this into a LUT, right here, these 2 folders of stuff into a LUT, I can bring that LUT into Adobe Camera Raw, and I can edit all of them to these standards at the raw level. Check this out. Go into the Zone System Express. There's a thing here called Save LUT. I press Save LUT. I'll turn this into a LUT. Now, this LUT workflow will work as long as there is no traditional masking on there. No pixel masking. Blendif and Blendif only. So if I rename this to Arcachon LUT, okay, because that's the city that I was in France. Make sure this is a cube and the grid points are at 32. We'll press OK. Where am I going to save it to? Let's save it right to that same folder because it'll be easier to find. Okay, so that's saved. Watch this. Go over to Bridge. I grab all of these images here. Right click. I'll open in Camera Raw. Now, I'm doing this very fast because I go over all of this in my training. I'm really just showing you why these things are so powerful. So if I were going to go over here to presets, and I have a whole video on this on my YouTube channel on how to make your own LUT-based profiles, I'm going to do this. Alt, you have to do this in Adobe Camera Raw. You cannot do this in Lightroom. I'll alt click on the new tearaway sheet. I'll call this LUT Arcachon Workflow. Okay. I don't want the point curve in there. The only thing I want in here is pretty much whatever Adobe color lookup table or look table I had in there before. And then we're going to create our own lookup table that we're going to basically pull in from what we saved from Photoshop. So that's where it was. Okay. Now I press OK. I have this minimum set to 0 and the maximum set to 232 samples because that's the grid points that we had. And we'll press OK. All right. So now watch this. When I hop over here into the basic settings and I scroll down to my user profiles, you're going to see here that I have this LUT Arcachon workflow, and I'll press OK. And you're going to say, well, why doesn't that look like it did in Photoshop? Well, that's because I haven't edited yet. Watch. As I edit this, look at that. Boom. So what's happening here is that because that LUT works at the top of the stack, it's at the top of the stack of everything that's happening in Adobe Camera Raw. That means that anything that happens underneath, guess what that LUT's doing? It's fluidly changing itself based on what's underneath. Mind blown. This is why I told you that traditional luminosity masks should be a thing of the past after learning Blendif, especially after seeing the Zone System Express. Okay, so check this out. If I were to grab this image right here, I've got these settings kind of like where I want them to. I might make this a little bit warmer, and then I might, maybe increase some texture here because that's a new thing. And then I'll grab this, press and hold Shift, click on the bottom, right click, and say Sync Settings. Press OK, and look at that. All of these images have now been edited at that fine art level with those gorgeous luminosity masks that we made in Photoshop as our base, and then built all of these in Adobe Camera Raw. Now that doesn't mean that I can't go in here and say, you know what, the exposure is not right here. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit brighter, and look at that. That LUT profile that we have set here, that LUT Arcachon workflow profile that we have set here, is going to change itself based on what is underneath. So as I move this up and down, what you're seeing here is not just the exposure changing, you're seeing that LUT interact with the image. And what's in the LUT? You're seeing those Blendif masks that were based on that pixel level as to how they're going to interact with the image as those pixels change underneath. This is mind-blowing, this is mind-boggling, and it's a huge shift in the workflow in Photoshop. So why am I showing you this? I'm not showing you this to flaunt the Zone System Express. Okay, the Zone System Express 6 is a killer panel, and it comes with 8 hours of education. I absolutely love it because I've put all of my time and effort into building it. It's gorgeous. My buddy Tony G coded it and revamped the whole thing for version 6, and it's killer. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is because there is an evolution and a shift in the way luminosity masks are working now in the workflow. And you should be considering a Blendif style luminosity mask when you're doing your edits, if that's the type of editing that you do. If you don't do that type of editing and this intrigues you, the Zone System Express makes it stupid simple in order to do it. All you do is click buttons and modify masks. And you saw how quickly I was able to do that on these images here. So those 3 reasons again as to why this new technique is so much better than the old luminosity masks. Number 1, those masks are fluid. The Blendif masks are fluid and they change. You can pour the water from one vessel into another vessel. You might have some spillover, but guess what? It still fits. All right. The old luminosity masks are like ice cubes. Once they're made, they're frozen. You try to take it from this vessel, put it into this vessel, and clunk, clunk, clunk. It doesn't work. The second reason why the Blendif masks are so much better than traditional luminosity masks is because you can drag and drop those layers from one image onto another image, and as those pixels change underneath it, it will modify itself because it's fluid. Okay. Number 3 reason why these Blendif masks are so much better than traditional luminosity masks is because you can make a LUT workflow out of it and use them at the raw level. I get so excited about that. Maybe I am amped up on way too much tea. I don't really drink too much coffee, so maybe I just had too much tea today. But every time I think about using these types of masks at the raw level, I get really excited. So if you see that there's one common thread that's shifting through all 3 of these reasons, and that's that these Blendif masks are fluid. They are not rigid, and they can modify themselves based on whatever pixels are underneath. This is mind-blowing stuff. If you're interested in the Zone System Express, in the description below, you'll see a link as to where you can get that. You can also do it in the card above. Again, I'm Blake Rudis. If you like this, please comment on it, share it, because this is groundbreaking stuff, and tell a friend. I appreciate you for taking the time to watch this. I sincerely appreciate you sticking around.